I've sold over 200 businesses worth more than $400 million total. And there's one thing that consistently gets my clients 30 to 40% more at closing. And 95% of other brokers, they don't have access to this. Look, most business owners, they're leaving hundreds of thousands of dollars on the table. And that's because their broker is pricing the business based on formulas and algorithms. If you're thinking about selling your company in the next few years, understanding the gap between this could be the difference between your retirement and having to keep working until you're in your 70s. Here's the thing, I've been on both sides of the table, both as a buyer and a seller. I've sold 6 of my own personal companies with my own money on the line. And I can tell you this firsthand from experience. The brokers who have access to private transaction comps get dramatically higher sales than the ones who don't. And most brokers, I'm telling you, they're flying blind. By the end of this video, you're gonna understand why traditional valuation methods leave money on the table, what the actual pricing tool is to drive top dollar offers, and how to tell if your broker has access to it or if he's just flying blind. Because if you're like most of my clients, your business isn't just an asset, it's your entire retirement plan. Look, let me start by explaining why selling a business is completely different than selling a house and why that difference costs you money. When you're selling a house, pricing is pretty straightforward. You go to the MLS, you look at what similar homes of similar size in your neighborhood have sold for in the last 6 months. 3 bedrooms, 2 baths, similar square footage. It's all public information. You can see exactly what buyers are paying. Business sales, they're the exact opposite. 95% of business transactions happen off market and privately, and none of those details are ever shared publicly. There's no MLS for a business. So when you ask a typical broker, what's my business worth? They're pulling out a formula using EBITDA multiples or some range of value. They're running a rule of thumb calculation. Some brokers out there are literally using an AI algorithm. But here's the problem. They have no idea what your business has actually sold for in the real market. Look, think about it for a second. If you were selling your home and a real estate agent said, I'm just gonna guess based on this pricing formula that I found in a textbook, you'd fire him immediately. But that's exactly what's happening in the business brokerage world every single day. And most sellers, they don't even realize it. Their stakes are completely different too. When you sell your house, you've probably got other assets. You've got your 401k, you've got your pension, other investments. The house, it's only one part of your net worth. But for most business owners that I work with, their business is 80 to 90% of their wealth. If the broker underprices it by 30%, that's not just leaving money on the table. That's fundamentally changing your retirement. If your broker doesn't have access to actual sales that have closed, actual market data, they're setting your price based on theory, not market reality. Bottom line, that's costing you money. So if formulas and algorithms don't work, what does? Let me introduce you to comps and why they are worth their weight in gold. A comp, which is short for comparable sale, is a previously sold business that's similar to yours. Similar size, similar industry, sold recently. It tells you what a buyer actually paid for a business that's similar to yours. Now look, we can't compare a Subway sandwich shop to a mechanic shop, right? That doesn't make any sense. For example, let's say we're selling a chain of dental practices, and I can show you 3 other dental groups that have recently sold, and that multiple is, say, at 6.2x EBITDA. That changes everything because now we're not guessing. We're not running some generic valuation formula that just spits out a number. We're showing a buyer, here's what the market is actually paying for a business like this. And here's the proof. This is how I've been able to drive price up by 30 to 40% when I'm selling a client's business. I had a client last year. It was a manufacturing business with about $2.5 million in EBITDA. We priced it at 17 million. A buyer came back and said, we've overpriced it. It felt high based on internal analysis. I pulled out 4 comps. Similar businesses, similar margins, sold in the last 12 to 24 months. The average multiple for those sold businesses was 6.9x cash flow or EBITDA. We were asking 6.8. So what happened? The buyer looked at the data and they went quiet for about 30 seconds. And then they said, okay, let's move forward. Deal closed at 16.8 million. If we hadn't used those comps, we'd have been negotiating in the dark. I guarantee we would have had to come down. Access to comps isn't something that's just nice to have. It's the difference between accepting a lowball offer because you know you don't know any better and confidently holding your ground because you do know better and you have proof what the market is willing to pay. Now, if you're watching this and you think, I need to know exactly what my business is actually worth and I need access to real world comps. Look, I'd love to help. We do a full business appraisal, complimentary and free. Normally we charge $3,000 for these appraisals. But if you're serious about selling within the next 12 months, I'm happy to waive the fee and do that appraisal for you. We'll walk you through your financials. We'll pull market comps. We will give you a realistic range of what you can expect to sell for in today's market. No obligation, no upfront fees, just real data. There's a link in the description below. Click on it if you're interested. Here's the uncomfortable truth about the industry. The vast majority of brokers, they don't have access to transactional data. Let me explain why. Here's the thing. In order to have access to comps, you need two things. One, you need to have sold a lot of businesses yourself because those transactions, they become your database. Two, you need access to a brokerage network where other experienced brokers are actually sharing this data on their closed deals. Most brokers, they don't have either. The average business broker in the industry right now is someone who probably transitioned out of selling real estate. Maybe they were selling insurance, or even worse, they could have been selling cars 3 months ago. So their database, it doesn't really exist. I've been doing this for over 16 years. I've sold over 200 companies. I've sold over $400 million in closed transactions. And more importantly, I'm one of the nation's most respected brokers in the country and have access to a vast network of other brokers who exchange information. So when I'm pricing your medical device company, your software business, or your chain of restaurants, I've got access to actual sales comps that have happened within the last 6 to 24 months. That's incredibly rare in this industry, and it's incredibly lucrative for sellers. Because when you're adding 40% to $1 million business, that's an extra $400,000 in your pocket at closing. When it's a $10 million business, it could be a $4 million swing. That's not a rounding error. That's a retirement plan. And look, I get why most brokers don't have this. Building a database, it takes years. And more importantly, you actually have to close deals. You have to be part of a network where people actually trust you and respect you, that they will actually share transactional data with you. You can't fake that. But the big problem is most business owners, they don't know to ask for this. They just hire a broker based on their pitch. The broker sounds confident, talks a good game, maybe shows them some generic market analysis. And the owners, they just assume the broker knows what he's doing. Then 6 months into the process, they start getting lowball offers. And they don't understand why. It's because the broker set the price based on a formula, not reality. And he has no way to combat it when buyers are presenting offers. Here's how you can tell if your broker actually has comps. 1, ask him directly. Can you show me 3 businesses similar to mine that have recently sold in the last 6 to 24 months? If they start talking about industry averages, or they pull out some formula, or they say, you know what, that information is proprietary and I can't share that, I'm telling you right now, they don't have it. A broker who actually has comps, they'll sit down and walk you right through them. They'll say, here's a business that's similar in size and industry and relative cash flow that recently sold, and here's what the multiple was. Here's why I think you can position your price somewhere in that range. That's the type of conversation you want to be having. Don't assume that your broker has access to real market data just because they sound confident. Most of them, I'm telling you, they're winging it, and that's costing you hundreds of thousands of dollars. So here's what we covered. Most brokers, they don't have access to private deal sales/comps, which means they're guessing when they're pricing your business. The brokers who do have access to those comps, they're typically getting 30 to 40% more when the deal closes. And you can tell what broker has them and doesn't just by asking one simple question. Can you show me 3 businesses that have sold that are similar to mine, similar in size, cash flow, etc., that have sold within the last 18 months? If they can't answer that question with real data, you're about to leave hundreds of thousands of dollars on the table. And here's the thing. The hard truth is this. You only get one opportunity to sell your business. There's really no do-over. Your one opportunity to cash out on decades of hard work. And if you get it wrong because you hire the wrong broker and he's using the wrong tools to price your business, that mistake, it's going to follow you for the rest of your life. If you want to know what your business is actually worth and you want somebody that actually has comps to show you and back that up, we're offering a free appraisal. Normally I charge $3,000, but for serious business owners that want to understand their valuation in today's market, there's a link in the description below. Schedule a call with me. Let's pull the data for your specific industry and business, and we can show you what businesses are actually selling for in your market. Because the worst thing you can do is go into the sales process blind. The second worst thing, trust a broker who's blinder than you. If you like the straight talk approach of what it actually takes to sell a business for top dollar, I'm posting every week. No fluff, just real advice from somebody who's been on both sides of the table. Thanks for watching. Don't leave money on the table.